the first part of it is the socialization of the value hierarchy. And the second is, and the estimation of the magnitude of error. It's like, you wouldn't think you'd come and sit in here to listen to that talk, really, would you? I'm not sure I would, but it is interesting. It's a very, very interesting problem. And here's part of what the problem is, the part of the problem I'm trying to solve. Part of it is, how is your emotional stability tied up with your social identity? That's a really important question. And I think it might be the central question that I've been pursuing as long as I've been able to think intellectually. That might be the problem that I've been pursuing, because one of the things I've been interested in is, why is it that people are so committed to their group identity, let's say, or their group beliefs, that they will, well, let's say, go to war to protect them or to spread them, or that they will commit atrocities, hypothetically, in defense of them. So it's a very interesting problem, because people, when people think about motivation for war, for example, they often attribute it to economic causes, and that just never struck me as plausible. Sometimes it's plausible, but it's not a deep solution as far as I'm concerned. It's more psychological. It's our beliefs are important to us. And what does it mean? Well, there's a lot of questions there. What do you mean by belief? Exactly. Physicists generally don't go to war over their belief in one physical theory over another, so it can't be just as simple as belief. It has to be more complicated than that. And people are committed to their beliefs too, and it isn't obvious what commitment means. And so those are the things that I've been trying to unpack. What does it mean to have a belief? And what does it mean? Why is it important to you? Why is it crucial to you? There's something associated deeply. There's a deep association between belief and value. And so then that brings up another question. What exactly do you mean by value? So that's three hard questions. And so that's part of it. And then, so that's the value hierarchy question, part of it. And then the error magnitude problem is, let's say you go to a party and you tell a joke, and you think it's a pretty funny joke, and you tell your joke, and no one laughs, and in fact they look at you like you're rather odd. And then the question is, well, how should you respond to that? Like, what exactly does that indicate about you? I mean, does it indicate a minor flaw in an otherwise stellar personality? Because that's a possibility. Or does it mean that, like, you're a creep? Right? And maybe right down to the core. And, you could even think the less that you think that it means that you're a creep, the more likely it is that you are one. So, but, it's very hard to estimate the magnitude of an error. We have, how upset should you get when something that you don't want to happen happens? And it's very, very hard to figure that out. If you wake up in the morning and, you have a pain, say, in your side, or you're not feeling particularly well, it's like, well, how upset should you get about that? And one answer is, well, like, maybe you're going to die in 3 months, maybe that's the beginning of pancreatic cancer and that's the end of you. And so maybe you should just be terrified into paralysis when you have a pain that you can't explain. Or maybe you should just brush it off and think, well, I'll get up and do what I usually do, and it's probably nothing. And sometimes you're right with the it's probably nothing approach, and sometimes if you don't go to the physician right away because you have some relatively trivial pain, then you're dead. And so this problem of estimating magnitude of error, importance of error, it's unbelievably difficult problem. And so I want to address both of those problems at the same time tonight. So that's the plan. So we'll see how that goes. So, and then I want to weave in there one more thing, which is this relationship between your own psychological structure, whatever that happens to be, your own value hierarchy, because there's a very tight relationship between your value hierarchy and your psychological structure, which is why hierarchies, by the way, are necessary, which is part of the point I was trying to make, say, in Rule 1 in 12 Rules for Life when I talked about hierarchies. There's no getting away from hierarchies. Because a hierarchy is a structure that tells you that one thing takes precedence over another, that one thing is more important than another, right? And if everything is of equal import, then nothing is more important than anything else, by definition. And then, well, what should you do? And the answer is, well, you can't tell, because nothing is any more important than anything else. And the definition of important, fundamentally, is something like that which you should do first. You know, that constitutes importance. That's also something that's relevant, I would say, too, because a lot of the way that we look at the world is as a place to. We look at the world as a place in which to act, and we make a lot of judgments about the nature of the world in terms of how we should structure our action. In fact, the theory that I am putting forth in general is a theory that's predicated on the notion that the essential way that we look at the world is as if it's a form of action, like a dramatic form, like a story. That's a good way of thinking about it, that we really do view ourselves and our place in the world as a story that's set in a narrative landscape. And, you know, you might argue that that's not the case. You can say, well, that viewpoint, for example, has been superseded by a scientific viewpoint, but it isn't obvious to me that that's the case. And it certainly isn't. It's certainly not the case that we act that way. And it's certainly not the case that we structure our political systems that way. And it's certainly not the case that we treat each other that way, or that we think that way, or that we react emotionally that way. And so that's a lot. And, you know, it's also the case that the other thing that's worth thinking about in this regard is, you know, we've only been thinking about the world as an objective place for 500 years, something like that. I mean, maybe you could chase it back to the ancient Greeks and go back 2,000 years, but whatever. From a historical perspective, 500 years or 200 years is the same amount of time, and it's a tiny fraction of the amount of time that living creatures that were approximately like us have been around. So we got along fine without thinking about the world as an objective place for a very, very long time. We survived, and here we are. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea, but it does imply that there are other ways of looking at the world that are highly functional and that have been conserved for let's say, for evolutionary reasons. And so, you know, if you make the case, which you might, that what you evolve to match is reality, at least you match it well enough so that reality doesn't kill you, which is more or less the definition of evolution. If you evolve to match reality in some sense, and the manner in which you evolve predisposes you to view the world as if it's a narrative of sorts, then possibly the world is a narrative of sorts.